And this discussion session would be moderated by Reverend Father Thettayil, Provincial of CMI, St. John's Province, Bijnor. Father Benny, as a theologian, is now sitting up there on the Himalayas. And I'm sure that from Himalayas, he would have a bird's eye view, a view at Indian church and Indian consecrated men and women. And I'm sure that he would be able to guide us in this discussion, and he would also offer us a concluding remark. Father Benny, as a theologian, as I have found him over the years, is a person who has been making a balancing act between theological abstraction and hermeneutical clarity. A Johannine, by training, I'm sure that Father Benny would make sense of all the discussion that has been happening on the need of ecclesiastical education among the consecrated men and women, among consecrated communities in the Indian Catholic Church. Now, the floor is open for discussion. I've already made the facility for you to unmute if you wish to speak. Anyone is free now to pose questions or clarifications or to make additions. And Father Benny, I request you to take over. Thank you.
Thank you, Sadhu. I think and I hope that I'm audible to all of you.
Indeed.
Dear fellow consecrated people and the unconsecrated and secular Vincent, greetings to all of you. We have got some abstract concepts made concrete by Joe's, great, and then some soft touch given to the philosophical and theological views that we are to have by Shalini, and some hardcore facts that we need to think about that came from Vincent. And all these have challenged us. And I'm not going to enumerate the points that you have already heard. I am giving a retreat, and then it came to an end just before this session, webinar, and then the one who thanked me preached another retreat, and that was boring. Now, that I am not going to do. But the time is short and precious, and we have got challenging themes that are posed by these three panelists. And then I would like to begin with a small little query from Joe's, because you opened the whole forum to discussion. Now, Joe's, you were talking about, that is a quote from Fides et Ratio, both reason and faith are the two wings that you have to fly on. And then, you know, from your experience and all of us as we try to live our life in faith, that some point in time, as we try to live our life, genuine life, the reason will leave you. And then, high and dry. And then there would only be the faith to lead you. And in that case, when, how would this statement of reason and faith carrying us all the way would be applicable? Would you please shed a little light?
Thank you, Father Benny. This would be, if we look reason, only the calculating reason or the scientific reason in the restricted sense. We may remember, as what Blaise Pascal said, the heart has reasons which the reason doesn't know. Or the Heideggerian poetic reason or meditative reasoning and analytic reasoning. This is, we need not go to the divine matters, even on that a very human level. How do I trust you? Physics will not be sufficient. But There is a reason for me to trust you. There is a reason for me to trust my father. That's not the reason which is scientifically tested, whether Paulos was my father through DNA testing. It's not, we don't need scientific verification. Humanly, it is impossible for us to verify all that we believe to be true. But at the same time, as rational human beings, we cannot say, I don't care whether it is true or not. That is also against our rationality. So I don't go by Kierkegaardian way of a leap into the dark, as if faith begins when reason ends. I would prefer both of them go hand in hand, mutually supporting. They are distinct but not separate. They complement one another. But there are struggles for reason. Now is the corona time. Thousands of brilliant scientists are struggling. Still we are not managing such a small virus, which even soap water can wash, but the nuclear weapons cannot do anything about it. Aren't we trusting when we took the vaccine and all that? And that's not without reasoning. Or my consecrated life and your consecrated life. Pure reasoning, the analytic reasoning will not be sufficient. But we are not consecrated people without reason. That's a different kinds of reason. So there are reasons and reasons, not only one kind of mathematical reason which has the truth value. In the philosophy, you have the truth table, symbolic logic, either true or false. We need to look for both and positions, or neither. No. We are all in the process of learning and coming closer to the truth, and we trust. And we go by belief. Probability and belief is the guide of life. I can continue, but we need to limit the time as well. Thank you, Benny.
Thank you, Jose. That was very convincing. If Saju or any of the panelists would have some questions, I would.
I will then. Shall I? Yeah. I have just a kind of a query to all the three panelists, because all the three of you have been engaged in ecclesiastical education at least for 2 decades, if not more. Now, Father Jose, your major audience in your classroom consists of consecrated young men and women. Sister Shalini has a mix of consecrated men and diocesians. And Father Vincent will have his classroom mostly filled by diocesan, but definitely there are a few consecrated men and women attending the sessions. Now, in your experience, what would be your advice to these consecrated young men and women to make their investment in theological education, in philosophical education, or for that matter, in anything connected to ecclesiastical education, more meaningful, to make their consecration and their mission meaningful? I would like to listen to all three of you briefly.
Jose, would you please give your view on that?
I could. I thought, being the ancilla theologia, I would give the first preference to the theologians, then move and a kind of remain as I was answering first. But I could give, from my point of view, that's happily. But I would suggest maybe Shalini would be better to begin with. My suggestion.
I'll take that suggestion. Jose, Shalini, would you want to come in?
Yeah, I suppose I understood the question correctly, what Father Saji was putting forward. Just rewording it so that I know I understood the question. How do we make consecrated men and women in our classroom integrate or make them their theological education more relevant, so that they become more committed to their mission, committed to their religious life?
Right.
I would say that is equally applicable to also the diocesan priests. For me, what matters is the level of motivation with which the students come, whether they are consecrated religious men or women, or even the diocesan clergy. From my experience so far, it is very, very difficult to get that level of motivation. Maybe 10% in your classroom have that high level of motivation who really want to theologize. 90%, sorry to say, that they come just as a requirement for their ordination. At least for those who are to be ordained, BTH is a requirement. And for me, that is the reason why things are not changing at the ground. Because they are really not theologizing, really not integrating, really not trying to understand the whole of Christian faith from their own experiences. That effort is not done. Now, you may ask me then, how do we make them do? Except that whatever way we can motivate, keep on motivating. Other than that, I have not found any method how to motivate the students. But there are also came across the students who are highly motivated and who do so very well, not only in just intellectual studies, knowing but then the whole integrated approach, and that is also shown in their future life as a priest, or as a religious priest, or even as sisters. But then still there's a big gap. I don't know how we'll bridge that gap.
Shalini, thank you very much. Vincent, would you please shed some light on what Sadhu said?
Yeah, Father Saju raised a very practical and also very serious question, or a difficulty which we all experience in our classrooms. I think I would go in the same line with Shalini, because when a woman speaks, always woman can feel the truth, experience the truth than man, I feel. So I was thinking also in the same line. My impression, which I have shared with many authorities here and elsewhere, is this: we give theology to an audience who have no thirst for theology. We give a banquet to people who are not hungry. I make such a statement because when we go to parishes or to lay people where there are so many theology classes today, or Jesus youth people like that, there we feel that the laity, the lay people have got much desire and need to know God, to know more about God, whom they have really experienced. The problem with the seminarians and sisters are, we have no experience of God, I would say. We have only given them so many notions, and they have learned so many prayers. They are repeating it one after another. Experience of God has been reduced to the level of some sensational level. They think that experience of God is something that they have when they are participating in a meditation in a very charismatic mood, some sort of feelings that they get. So I would say we should cut short the years of formation for theology, and we must induct another program, even though we have an ongoing formation program that also has not been, that is inducted into our into the life of priests and religious. But again, that becomes very notional. Perhaps I would go for a short-term formation before ordination or before taking the final vow, and later after. Now, once I see that once these priests, young priests, they start becoming a parish priest. In the beginning years, they would be normally assistants. They are not confronting real challenges. Within 10 years, they start to reflect on, or they seek for explanations and good insights, because they have to respond to people at that time. Not only that, even psychologically speaking, they come to a middle part of their life. They ask serious questions towards themselves. They ask what I have given to this world, what I have earned in this life. Such questions have come in, I think, in our life, in our 30s, late 30s or 40s. So I think we have to change the very curriculum, and we have to include such a kind of massive information at a later stage when people are really thirsty. Secondly, another point is, don't invite people who have no motivation. I think Shalini emphasized that. Many of the people who learn theology is just to have a diploma, to have a certificate before taking the vow, or before becoming a deacon or getting ordained. I think one of the fundamental issue is that we meet only very few people with a genuine vocation. I have been working 25 years now in the seminary here. Of course, I am not the last word. It is Holy Spirit who calls everybody. But still, the impression which I get is this. Among the vocation we get, there are only maybe 40% of people who have genuine vocation. Another 30% get adjusted slowly or come to the real vocation later. And another 30% not at all bothered about it, or they leave priesthood.
Vincent,
So thank you. It's the short.
Would you conclude?
I
Please?
concluded. Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent. That was very inspiring. Jose, would you please make a short statement?
Yeah, the challenge is to make it enjoyable and fruitful. And if theological formation is difficult, philosophical formation equally, or sometimes even more. That's the reason is, one, the elders, not the juniors. I don't see the priests, consecrated people, busy with theological, philosophical, or issues that's related with the consecrated life. We are more busy learning physics, commerce, and the other secular studies. Why? The students are doing it because I can speak from my CMI community and from other ones, the superiors, the seniors, give more value to those. So we need to make this is necessary to make our priestly life and consecrated life this kind of intellectual training, human formation as necessary. So we are all in a way utilitarians. What is the benefit of it? I normally challenge my students and myself. What? So what? Now what? I teach medieval philosophy. Why am I teaching the medieval philosophy? And I ask the students. So to the extent that I could make this utilitarian in single inverted commas, they see a point, then that would be good. And students, wherever there are, I consider 10 to 20% would be brilliant students, 10 to 20% would be useless, and the limited number we would gain. So I'm happy that there are students in my class and I enjoy the engagements with them. I love it.
Thank you, Jose, Vincent, and Shalini for challenging everyone who is here listening to you. We have got a question from Paulina and then Joby. So would Paulina raise her question?
Father Joby, please, if you have a question.
If Paulina is not ready, would Joby?
Father, I would like to ask a question to Father Kundulam, because we are speaking about unlearning. In philosophy also, we speak about the paradigm shifts, because we are born in a particular paradigm and we are exposed to, because of the studies, different paradigms. And can we truly hold on to the paradigms that we have? Sometimes we have to suffer for the new endeavor, the new undertakings and the new vision that we have, because there is a uniform thinking is always hovering over us.
Father Vincent, would you please respond to Joby?
I did not capture the question. I think there was no question in it. He was just making an observation. There is a pressure from outside to have a unique or a uniform language or uniform theology. I think that's what I heard. I'm not sure. Have I understood your question, Father Joby?
Yeah, so it's also an observation or also a question. How do we face in our new way of understanding the new paradigm shift that we have and the challenges how do we respond to the challenges away from the uniform way of thinking to another way of thinking?
Yeah, I think in my already in my exposition or when I spoke very spontaneously, I had given you, I think, a few parameters. I said no to a neo-orthodoxy method, no to radical opposition, no to liberal adaptation, and no to indifferentism, but adopt a constructive approach towards the problems with an attitude of learning something from there and reviewing our theological premises and experiences in the light of the problems and challenges raised from our secular world. I think this is the attitude we have to cultivate. Rather than, I think today the whole problem that is haunting us is the problem of identity. We think that identity needs a separatedness. Identity is constructed while we distinguish ourselves from the rest. We are thinking of making a parallel society in a world which is very cosmopolitan and pluralistic. And that is the danger we have. So I think, as you said, there will be a resistance from people, criticisms from people, but knowing the context and knowing the people, educating them slowly, we must follow the pedagogy, the phenomenological, and even the deconstructive and constructive attitudes of Jesus from the gospel.
Thank you, Father Vincent. Since there are no more questions, no more hands raised, and since Father Sadhu has asked, a brief one, Sadhu has asked me to conclude. Brief one, Jose, please.
No, it's Sister Novia has raised a question in the chat box.
Right.
To Shalini.
Are you sure that it was a question?
Yeah, the second part, if you check the, it's a personal question, how far we succeeded.
Shalini, in the light of Genesis 1:27, Shalini said, in formation period, the candidates need to unlearn or erase. But that is not what Shalini said. Unlearn and erase from Vincent. Many of the doors that they have stored in their mind to erase. How far you succeeded in that direction? Now, that was not a question perhaps to Shalini from Navya. Perhaps it is Vincent who has to answer that. Would you please, Vincent, briefly, how have you succeeded so far to erase or delete and unlearn the many dawns that you have stored in your mind? Practical answer.
It's very simple, I think. Read gospel, not by hearting, learning some sentences from Bible. Learn the attitude of Jesus. Of course, we need an exegetical and a scientific approach in studying Bible, which is very, very much lacking today. If we really read Bible, gospel, we will encounter Jesus, who really understands our concerns and our problems. And meditation is very much needed on Jesus' way of tackling people, resolving issues, responding to challenges. And even in the midst of the turmoil, he kept a very balanced and pious, I would say, human and also divine attitudes. I think the simple answer I come now more and more on this is have a really meditation on the Bible, meditation on the gospel, especially I won't say much on our Testament, and help people to meet Jesus. Once you start loving Jesus, understand who Jesus is, we will not be in any way frustrated. I'm not frustrated, even though in my speech, I always provoke people. I share my sadness and things. I'm not frustrated. I know this is the way things will go on. But a prophet, a prophet who is a theologian has no other way but to expose Jesus, nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you, Father Vincent.
Father Benny, may I now request you to have your concluding remarks?
I am going to Sadhu. Dear friends, consecrated and as I came into this chat room, I did not know that it would be so challenging, and the issues that were discussed would be less challenging than the questions that we have posed before ourselves. I have many more questions to the three of you. The lack of time does not permit me to ask these questions. I would like to make the conclusion with a few remarks. There are challenges certainly on the level of the process, on the level of the personnel, and the level of the content in our theological education. And these challenges are real. And we have, as I learned the philosophy and theology, and I learned with some of you, I'm convinced of the fact that we are flying on the wings of our assumptions. And this is the greatest challenge that we have. Sometimes, as many of you presented your views, we are self-complacent and oblivious to the challenges that we are facing. And these challenges are to be met before we come to the ecclesiastical education. In ecclesiastical education, we are only trying to whitewash, never cleaning, never smoothening the walls. In the existential level, we need first to have the human formation before these ecclesiastical education and formation. On the Fideic level, we need to understand the basics of the faith that we are supposed to have in order to build on it in theological classes or the philosophical classes. We will not be able to give the preliminary lessons to our students in those classes. We need to have these before they come to the classes on theology and philosophy. Now, we assume that our children have it, our students have it, but in reality, they do not have. So, in the existential level, we have not had the adequate human formation. In the Fideic level, we have not had the basic Catholic, Christian, catechetical formation, and then we come to the higher levels, and there we do not gauge the caliber of these students before we take them. And finally, the professional level, as we come to the consecrated life, we have not yet come to learn to have the gospel joy or the joy of consecrated life, which should come as a result of our philosophical and theological learning, which would be a greater challenge for all of us. The response that we give to philosophical and theological education in my consecrated life should be having a more complete life and fullness of joy as consecrated persons. And this is the assumption on the basic level. The second assumption that is a challenge to all of us comes from the personnel. I began as a teacher, but then I myself am not prepared adequately as a teacher, and some of the teachers that I used to have are not adequate enough to teach and to meet the students. And when on the lower level of formation, initial formation, and higher level of formation as well, when we teachers are not adequately prepared, as Vincent rightly said, we need to meet this challenge first. And then why? Because we cannot give others experience-wise, faith-wise, what we do not have. And that is that all the Latin dictum tells us always. It is good to keep that in mind. And then, as the time is running out, I would conclude with the last challenge. That is the assumption on content, the challenge on content. The content, both of philosophical and theological formation that we are talking about and discussing, would have, I'm not generalizing it, there are teachers who are updating themselves and there are institutions that are updating themselves, but more often than not, we are dealing with archaic subjects which do not have any relevance or less relevance today. They are not topical. They do not speak to the times and the needs of the times. And these are the three challenges that I am facing and I have faced. And when Shalini said that some of the questions that these youngsters as women are asking, they are really challenging. We are not perhaps prepared. And I could see the face of Shalini when she was narrating that she didn't find herself rising up to measure up to the questions that these youngsters are asking us, formators, theological and philosophical educators. So, friends, these are the greatest challenges that we are facing, despite the fact that without these theological and philosophical centers of education, we would not have had these great minds and hands and hearts that are there leading the church today. And hats off to all our educational institutions that are philosophical and theological, giving education in these two levels. But I would also want these institutions to rise up to the challenge, looking perhaps at the initial level of formation with which they come to us, theologians and philosophers, whether they are adequately prepared to receive what you have to give them. With this challenge, and then congratulating Jose, Vincent, and Shalini, and Saju for organizing this kind of a challenging webinar with challenging topics, and those participants who raised some questions, I conclude and I thank all of you. Thank you.